She lay in the snow, trembling, the fear still clawing at her chest. A hand reached out, a voice whispered, "I won't hurt you." But she had heard lies before. Would this be another betrayal? Or something she never dared to hope for? The wind screamed through the skeletal branches, cutting through the night like a blade. Snow fell in thick, suffocating waves, blanketing the frozen ground in merciless silence. But beneath the howling storm, another sound trembled in the air, a deep, guttural wail. It was not a call for help. It was the sound of something breaking. Lexa stood alone in the bitter cold, her body shivering violently, though not just from the freezing air. Her once thick coat hung in filthy, matted clumps, clinging to her too thin frame. Her ribs pressed against her skin. Her breath came in ragged gasps, every exhale visible in the frigid night. Hunger clawed at her stomach, but she barely noticed any more. She had trusted once, loved once. But humans lie. It had happened so fast. One moment she was in the car, her tail wagging, her heart bursting with joy. She loved car rides, the rush of the wind against her fur, the familiar scent of her human beside her, the promise of adventure. She had pressed her nose against the window, watching the world blur past, oblivious to the hollow silence that had settled over him. She should have known something was wrong. The drive was longer than usual, no familiar turns, no stops at the park. The smell of home never came. Then the car slowed. Her ears perked as the tires crunched over frozen dirt. She turned to him, waiting for a glance, a word, anything to tell her what was happening. But his face was stone. No smile, no warmth. The door opened. A gust of freezing wind rushed inside, carrying the scent of damp earth and snow. Lexa hesitated, waiting for a command, an explanation, something. But there was nothing, just the shove. She stumbled out, paws slipping on the frozen ground. Confused, she turned back, ears pinned, her breath coming faster now. Why? Why were they stopping here? Then the door slammed shut. The engine growled back to life, and the car began to roll forward. Panic slammed into her. She lunged, paws scraping against the metal, her claws screeching as she tried to hold on. No, no, no. This was wrong. She had done nothing wrong. She ran. Faster than she ever had, her muscles burning, her breath tearing from her throat in desperate gasps. The red taillights glowed ahead, her only anchor to the life she had known. She chased them. Her paws tore open against the icy road, leaving streaks of blood in the snow. Her lungs ached, her vision blurred, but she pushed forward. Because this couldn't be happening. Because he wouldn't leave her. Because she was his dog. But the car never slowed. The lights grew smaller, and then they were gone. The silence that followed was worse than the wind. Lexa stood there, frozen, her body trembling uncontrollably. Snow gathered around her, creeping up her legs like icy hands. The forest loomed ahead, a black maw of twisting branches and hidden dangers. She waited, for the sound of tires turning back, for the voice calling her name, for the warmth of familiar hands. But the road remained empty. She was alone. The cold sank deep into her bones, hollowing her out. Her stomach twisted painfully, but there was no food, no home, no shelter. The wind howled through the trees, whispering with unseen threats. Shadows moved in the distance, low, slinking shapes, watching. Predators. Her ears flattened, her heart pounding. She was weak. She wouldn't stand a chance. She turned and fled. Her legs burned, but she ran, deeper into the trees, stumbling through the snow, her breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. She ran until she couldn't anymore, until her legs gave out, and she collapsed beneath the twisted roots of an old tree. The forest smelled of decay, damp earth, and death. The snow clung to her fur, seeping into her skin. She curled into herself, trying to disappear. Her body ached, her chest tight with something worse than cold, worse than hunger. Betrayal. She closed her eyes, but the memory burned behind them. The car, the shove, the red lights fading into the dark. She had loved him. She had trusted him, and he had thrown her away like she was nothing. A low, broken whimper escaped her throat. The night stretched on, endless and unforgiving. And as the storm raged, burying the world in ice and silence, one final thought took hold inside her. A promise. A vow. She would never trust again. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the bitter scent of ice and death. The cold was unrelenting, wrapping around Lexa like a steel trap, draining the last reserves of warmth from her trembling body. Snow clung to her fur, melting against her skin, only to freeze again. Every step was agony. Her stomach clenched with hunger, an empty, aching void that had become her only constant. Days had passed, how many, since she had last eaten? The filth of human waste offered nothing. The dumpsters picked clean, the frozen earth too cruel to surrender even the smallest scrap. She had tried. She had searched, clawed through piles of discarded trash, licked at frost-covered bones left behind by creatures luckier than her. She had even fought for food. A few nights ago, was it nights? She had stumbled upon a crumpled plastic bag outside a gas station. The scent of grease had hit her like a drug, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. She had lunged for it, desperate, clawing, tearing. And then the attack. A low growl, the flash of yellowed teeth. A massive stray had exploded from the darkness, slamming into her with the force of a hammer. His jaws locked around her shoulder, twisting, crushing. Pain had flared white-hot, but she barely noticed. Food, food. But the mutt was stronger, more desperate. He snarled, dragging the bag from her grasp, his sunken eyes wild with hunger. Lexa had flattened her ears, lowering herself in submission. She wasn't looking for a fight. She just wanted to live. But survival had no mercy. The mutt had taken the food and vanished into the night. She had licked her wounds and moved on. Now, as the blizzard thickened around her, she knew she needed shelter. Somewhere to escape the wind, to let her shaking legs rest. But where? Then, a sound, not the wind. A growl, low, deep, close. Her body went rigid. Glowing eyes watched her from the darkness, shifting, circling. Wolves. Her heart pounded, her breath sharp and shallow. Don't run, she knew, she knew. The moment she ran, they would chase. A single snap of a branch shattered the silence. It was all it took. Her body moved before her mind. She ran. The wolves followed. Snow swallowed her paws as she tore through the frozen landscape, lungs burning, heart hammering against her ribs. The growls grew louder, the crunch of paws against ice closing in. She pushed forward, blind with fear, her world nothing but the endless white and the snapping jaws behind her. Then, her paw caught on something, a jagged root hidden beneath the snow. She crashed to the ground, pain exploding through her limbs, and then the lunge, a massive shadow bearing down on her, teeth gleaming in the dim moonlight. Survive. Instinct took over. She twisted, snapping her jaws, catching flesh. A sharp, furious yelp rang out, and the weight lifted. She scrambled to her feet, blood dripping from her muzzle. The wolves hesitated now, circling, watching, waiting. Her chest heaved. Her legs trembled. She wouldn't win this. Then, a shift in the air, a scent, a presence. Human. The wolves smelled it too. Their ears flicked, their bodies tensed. Then, just as quickly as they had come, they vanished into the night. Lexa stood frozen, her heart slamming against her ribs, her breath coming in ragged gasps. And then, the voice, soft, cautious. "Hey girl, are you okay?" Her head snapped toward the sound. A man. He stood a few feet away, bundled in thick winter clothing, his breath curling in the icy air. She staggered back, ears flattened, muscles tight with fear. No, not again. She didn't trust humans, not anymore. Her lips curled, a snarl rising in her throat before she could stop it. The man didn't move, didn't step closer. He just crouched, extending a gloved hand. "I won't hurt you," he whispered. Lies. All of them lied. With a final snarl, she turned and fled. The trees swallowed her whole, but the voice stayed with her long after she disappeared into the night. "I won't hurt you." The storm didn't let up. The wind screamed through the trees, slamming against Lexa's weakened body with merciless force. Snowfall thickened, coating the earth in a pale, suffocating shroud. Her breath came in ragged puffs, each exhale visible in the frigid air, each step heavier than the last. She had run far, farther than she should have in her state. Her limbs trembled with exhaustion, her paws raw from the frozen ground, but still she didn't stop. She couldn't, not after seeing him. The man. His scent still clung to the air, a human's scent, faint traces of leather, wool, and something warm, something safe. But humans were not safe, not anymore, not after what they had done. Her chest ached as the memory clawed its way back. The car, the shove, the slamming door, the red taillights fading into nothing. She had chased, she had begged, she had trusted. And she had been thrown away like trash. The thought alone made her stomach twist. A deep, hollow pain, one that had nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with something far worse: betrayal. She stopped beneath the cover of a fallen tree, curling into herself as the wind raged around her. The night stretched on, endless and unkind. She didn't know how long she lay there. Minutes, hours, maybe more. Then, the smell. Food. Her ears twitched, a scent so faint, yet so painfully real. She lifted her head, nostrils flaring, the rich, undeniable aroma of meat. Fresh. Her empty stomach clenched violently. She pushed herself up, unsteady, and followed it. The scent led her back through the woods, through the frozen silence, back to him. At first, she didn't see him, but the smell of food was unmistakable. And then, there it was. A small piece of chicken left carefully on the ground, no traps, no strings attached, just there. Her instincts screamed danger. Humans were cruel, deceptive. She knew this, but the hunger was stronger than her fear. She stepped forward cautiously, every muscle tense, her ears pinned back. Her eyes darted around, waiting for movement, for the snap of a leash, the sting of betrayal. Nothing. The chicken was warm, fresh. She hesitated for only a moment longer before snatching it up and bolting. She didn't stop running until she was far, far away. Only then did she eat. She devoured it, tasted nothing. Only survival. The next night, she returned. The man was there this time, sitting a short distance away, bundled in thick layers against the cold. He didn't speak, didn't move. But another piece of food lay waiting. She wanted to run, wanted to ignore it, but she didn't. She took it. And this time, she didn't run as far. Night after night, the pattern continued. He always came alone, sitting quietly in the same spot. He never chased her, never called out, never forced her closer, but every time he left something behind. Food. Warm, fresh food. At first, she would wait until he was gone before she took it. Then she started creeping closer, just enough to see him clearly, just enough to watch. His scent became familiar. His movements, slow, deliberate, careful, became predictable. He never reached out, never tried to touch her. It was as if he knew. She wasn't ready. Days passed, then weeks. Something inside her, something broken and bruised, began to shift. One night, she waited. He placed the food down, then sat back as he always did. But this time, she didn't wait for him to leave. This time, she took a step closer. The snow crunched beneath her hesitant paws. Her heart pounded. The man stayed still, his breath fogging the icy air. She could smell him now, his warmth, his quiet patience. She crept closer, inch by inch, her muscles tight, ready to bolt at the slightest wrong move. He remained silent, still. And then, for the first time, she lifted her head and met his eyes. His gaze was steady, not demanding, not sharp, like the man who had abandoned her. Just quiet. Lexa hesitated. Then slowly, cautiously, she took another step. The tips of her nose brushed against his outstretched fingers. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel alone. Trust didn't return overnight. Even as Lexa slept in warmth, even as food filled her belly, the past still clung to her like a shadow. Ethan never forced her inside that first night. He simply left the door open. She had hesitated, paws sinking into the snow, lungs filled with doubt. But the wind howled behind her, the cold creeping deeper into her bones. So she stepped inside. The fire crackled, filling the room with warmth she no longer knew how to accept. She stayed by the door, tense, watching, waiting. Ethan never reached for her, never called her closer. He simply placed the bowl down and sat back. The food smelled real, fresh, not scraps and not filth, a gift. Hunger won. She took it. And then she stayed. Days turned to weeks. She never let him touch her, never let her guard slip completely, but the distance between them grew smaller. At first, she only ate when he wasn't looking. Then she took the food while he sat near. Then she crept closer. One night, she met his eyes for the first time. He didn't look away, didn't demand anything, just waited. And for the first time in forever, she wasn't afraid. But ghosts don't fade easily. One night, a door slammed too hard, too loud, too familiar. Panic crushed her chest, her breath coming in ragged bursts. She staggered back, ears flat, trapped. She saw the past again, the car, the shove, the red lights disappearing. Ethan sat down, didn't speak, didn't reach for her, just waited. His voice, when it came, was soft. "It's okay." Lexa trembled. It wasn't. But maybe it could be. Her legs shook as she stepped forward. Small, hesitant. Then his hand, it didn't shove. It didn't push her away. It was warmth. It was patience. It was home. Lexa never fully forgot. Some wounds never heal completely. But when the fear crept in, when the past whispered that all of this could be ripped away, she felt his hand, heard his voice, knew he wasn't leaving. She had been broken. She had been lost. But against all odds, she had been found.